Hey there, Aaron here with the End Times Boardroom, coming at you with another word. Been trying to get this word out for a few days now. Been running into some difficulties, technical difficulties, as well as just other difficulties, and getting this on a recording. And so I'm glad that looks like hopefully this will take. But as I was spending some time in the Bible this weekend, in my quiet time with the Lord, I felt like I was hearing the word miracle more than once. When I heard the word, I went back to the index of the Bible, or my Bible, and I looked up miracle, and it had some verses back there. And I was reading them, here and there, but typically, whenever I'm doing a word, there's verses that I draw off of, and, I talk about it, and sometimes I'll relate to my personal experience, but this time was different. I felt like God wanted me to talk about my personal experience, a personal testimony, and that testimony is my home. And it was something that was a very big event for me. By the grace of God, I'm able to experience this blessing. It's tangible. I can see it. I'm reminded of it every time I look at it or I think about it. And, getting here, the road to getting here was not easy. But then again, that is the definition of what a miracle is. And so, with that being said, I wanted to talk about what he's telling me to, just tell what happened in this road that got me here. I don't know who this is for. I don't know what you guys are going through. Maybe you're waiting on a promise from God that seems like it's not going to happen. Maybe you feel stuck. Maybe you just feel like you're in a season of delay. I mean, I don't know your circumstance, but what I can tell you is that all of these things I have experienced in my life. Um, in my house, just so you know, this is my first house that I've ever owned, and I am not in my 20s. So, if you're hearing this, I want to tell you that there's hope for you, that God can provide for you, really at any stage of your life. And, as for those of you guys, I don't think I've told anybody on here, but like I've been married for a little over a year. Um, my wife and I, prior to getting married in 2024, we were not living together. I was living in an apartment, and she was living in a townhome that she had purchased years back. Well, what ended up happening was we were trying to, um, we were getting married, and I think within like 60 to 90 days of us getting married, we purchased this home. But in that short time frame, there was so much that happened. It was just kind of crazy. And so essentially, there were sacrifices made. My wife and I, unfortunately, didn't have the funds to, have a wedding with all of our family that we would have wanted. It was essentially, you get the big wedding and not so much house, or you do a real small wedding and you get more house. And so that was a hard decision that had to be made. And we obviously opted on the house because we looked at it as a future investment. And I mean, we have plans for the future, and we're trying to make sure that we're setting ourselves up. And so that was a big sacrifice that was hard on us. Well, as soon as we got married, we're like, okay, we got to get this house. I can't tell you how many hours we spent on this computer I'm recording on to look at houses. I mean, you get on the screens of these websites, and you're hovering over an area, and it gives you the price, and you see the pictures, and you click on it, and you go through the pictures. I don't know how many houses we looked at. I don't know how many hours we spent on that. We try to do the responsible thing, take my expenses, write it down on paper, and what I bring home net. The same for her, combine them, trying to figure out the budget on how much house we thought we could afford. Looked at some mortgage calculators, and the process was very overwhelming, to say the least. And another thing is that housing in the DFW area was still pretty high in 2024. Prices were still relatively high. Interest rates were still relatively high. I mean, you're looking at, I think when we were applying through some banks and stuff like that, I mean, the rates were like 6.5 or 6.25. And some people may say disagree and say that's not a bad rate, but when we're looking at this through the lens of what happened in the pandemic, I mean, we saw all-time lows, and so obviously we're born in 2020, buying a house then, so it kind of, as they say, it is what it is. We're trying to buy a home based on what the market had to offer, and so that alone in itself, when we were looking at homes, that was like a very big factor in how we were feeling about the whole process. I mean, when you're purchasing an asset that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, any increase in the interest rate is going to dramatically affect your monthly payment, and that's not even including the property taxes that we have here in Texas, which tend to be on the higher side. So there was a lot of stresses that we were looking at. We spent a lot of weekends in that short time frame, like driving about. I had a little spiral notebook, and I was writing down all these addresses and going from house to house, trying to map out what was the most efficient way to get there, and so we're not on the road all day. And we looked at plenty of houses, and the area of the Metroplex that we were in, I mean, although it was closer to our jobs and a lot more convenient than that way, it just wasn't, we didn't feel like it was a prudent move to stay there. The houses in that part of town or that part of the city, the Metroplex, were, they were older. Neighborhoods weren't always the best. They weren't necessarily updated. So a lot of cons, what we were looking at. And so we were deciding, that maybe we should look elsewhere, basically on the other side of the Metroplex. And unfortunately, you go to the other side of the Metroplex, your commute gets significantly longer, but you get more house. So we understood that there was going to be some sacrifice, but we wanted to make sure that the juice was worth the squeeze. And so essentially, we were looking at these houses, going out to different open houses. The brand new houses that we saw, they were nice, but sometimes they weren't in the right neighborhood, or they were right next to some things that maybe were kind of annoying, like it's a really loud train track, or, the power lines, like right up, it just, there was a lot of things. And so I'm not saying trains are bad necessarily, but like, and so the way that they were positioned, there was like no sound barrier. And so it was kind of hard at times. But we kept looking, we kept trying, and I was going to a different church at the time, and my realtor is actually from my old church, and maybe one of these days, Lord willing, I'll have him on here, and he can talk about, not only the experience he had with us, but also other experiences that he's had in his walk with Jesus. And what ended up happening was, I don't even know how this happened. I mean, it was like a blur when I tell you. But one weekend we were on our way out, and we were going to a house. Can't tell you where the house is at. I don't know the address, but we were driving out that way, and it was a house that was, I want to say it was built in the early 2000s, because by that point I can probably say without convict or without slipping up here, is that there was a lot of looking at the circumstance through our human eyes and human logic, and not necessarily through faith. We were walking by sight, not by faith, in a lot of this. And looking back now, I realize that when we were doing that, it's very easy to do. Um, a lot of people in the Bible had the same issue. Those are probably the times where we felt the most discouraged. And so, we were driving by this little highway outside of our subdivision and see some signs. And, I'm looking over and I'm in the truck driving. My wife's in the passenger seat. I'm just looking over. I see the house. We're looking over. I was like, hey, you know what? I was like, they got these open houses over here. You want to go check this out? This looks like a nice little area. That was the beginning of everything. We weren't even looking in like this immediate area or this particular area. We got into this housing division, and it was like something just, I don't know. It's like we got tunnel vision. Like we were just laser focused on getting in here, and it was a blur. So we didn't look at any houses, to my knowledge, out after this. We got started looking at this subdivision, and so we come in, and there was a couple of builders, to my understanding, that had built this subdivision, and the houses were kind of intermingled, throughout the builders. And I liked that because the builders, they built similar houses, but not so similar that it looked like cookie cutters, but like they were very unique. And so the block, it's not as eccentric or whatever the word I'm looking for, like eclectic, or I don't know, as some of the other older neighborhoods and the Metroplex. But I mean, for a brand new subdivision, or pretty much brand new subdivision, it was pretty nice. And so when we got in, the subdivision was pretty much built up. I believe that they were at the end of phase 4 of 5, and that'll come into play later. But basically, we come in, there's two builders. One of the builders was a little bit more, they were a little fancier. They were also more expensive, but a very nice house, very well built homes. And the lady was very nice in that home that was the representative for the builder. And we were looking at their floor plans. We looked at multiple houses that they had to offer, but their floor plans and the price points just weren't really, we just didn't feel as comfortable with that. Also, the availability of the inventory was also questionable, because there were some floor plans that we liked, but we would have had to wait like an additional, I don't know, 6 to 9 months or something like that, if we wanted to get a house. And so there was kind of an uncomfortable thing. They also were not offering any kind of promotional deals that I recall as far as the financing went. So there was also that to consider. And my lease in my apartment was basically coming to an end, like essentially right after we got married, like really close to. So it was like, well, I don't want to live in an apartment. My wife didn't want to live in an apartment, because we were going to have to sell her townhouse. And we didn't sell the townhouse until after we got this house. And that's a whole nother story that God moved in. But basically, we were looking at that. We started looking at banks to try to see what we could get pre-qualified for. And I was running into some issues with that, some very unusual, unnatural things that, even the finance people were like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. I don't, they were commenting on the strange things. And during this process, we encountered quite a bit of spiritual warfare. And I won't speak on my wife's behalf, but for me personally, it was a lot. Like the irregularities in the paperwork was that was on my side, and it was things that I mean, I was like, how is this happening with these delays and everything like that? Well, um, it was just one of those things, and so it was very frustrating, discouraging. Also, as we were purchasing this home, and I'm getting into the final week or two of getting this home. I'm not really one to get sick, but one of my ears, like I don't know if there's like a tube back here, but it was completely clogged. It felt like I had something just stuck here, and I couldn't hear like out of that ear like at all. So I'm trying to put drops. I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, help me. And it was very annoying and frustrating because at my job I talked to a lot of people. I was running departments at my job, and or my old job, that is, and I couldn't really hear, and so it was very annoying with that. But also my equilibrium, I also felt was off. So I was kind of dizzy, and one day too, out of nowhere, I was having some very severe stomach pains. They passed, but I'm talking about like it was so bad. Like I was just like it felt like a searing pain almost, like right in the middle of my stomach. Very odd. And I've never had anything like that happen before. And I don't recall ever feeling that pain. And so it was just things like that. And there's other things that happened along this journey that'll come up. But those are just some of the things we were going through. Um, what was interesting about this whole situation was, we just couldn't make it work with this builder. So we went down the road because the model homes were right next to each other, almost, kind of catty corner. We went down the road and talked to the builder that built this house. And there was more than one person working there. They're very nice people. And they're the ones that helped us throughout the process. Well, come to find out that when we started looking at their floor plans, they weren't as fancy as the other builder, but they did good work. We were just very pleased with what we were seeing. We looked at their floor plans and we're like, okay, it's not too bad. And there was more availability, or so we, there seemed to be, the inventory seemed to be a little bit more what we were looking for, price point wise, size wise, what we could get. And so um, we started, talking to them and trying to figure out. And we really liked this community for, although our work commutes were essentially just uh, lengthened by quite a bit of time, um, everything else was like a plus. So, um, my commute, unfortunately, I used to live down the street from my old job. Now my commute was over an hour. Uh, unless I was leaving like at 5 a.m. and that was in the morning, but coming back home, it was over an hour every day. Um, my wife's commute, I think, doubled, so she was driving about 45 minutes, 50 minutes each way. And she has very early hours too, so I mean, and she's not in rush hour, so that tells you how crazy the traffic can get in the DFW Metroplex. If you're from here, around here, you've been through here, you know what I'm talking about. And so we were just like, wow, like, I mean, that was kind of a drag. And my wife ended up having to transfer offices. She was having to leave like an office that was, um, like more fancy, newer, had more amenities, and go into one of their older offices at her employer. And the good thing was, though, that at least she knew some people at the branch that she was transferred to, and she has some really good friends there. So it wasn't a total loss in that regard. And that was just how one of the downsides. But the upsides were, we were getting virtually, kind of like more house. We like the amenities. There's trails around here, some ponds. Um, they have a pool that's really nice. There's just a lot of good things that we really liked, and they have a little school in the subdivision. So we were like, hey, let's really try to figure this out. We really want to make it work here. And as we're talking to the second builder, we figured out that they actually had a promotional deal going on, and it was for a special interest rate for virtually the life of the loan. And this interest rate was significantly lower than anything on the market at that time. And even in 2025, it's still significantly lower. Um, by, and from 2024, it was like basically more than a point and a half, closer to 2 points off of what any of the banks were offering. And so we were like, hey, this is a great deal. And, we were trying to make this work. Well, the, um, the kicker on this whole thing is that there was only a limited number of promotional deals available. You have to think, you're in phase 4 or the phase right before the last phase. A lot of those promotional deals are probably gone. And so, we were scrambling trying to figure it out. There was a house that we did end up really liking, and it's a house that's just a few houses down from where we live, and we really liked that house. And my wife and I decided, you know what, we're gonna try to get this house. And we by the time we got all the paperwork together and everything that we needed, and I'm talking about we were moving fast, we called, and I believe the builder had told me that it had sold either the day before or the day, a couple days before. So we were unable to do it. And by this time, it's getting a little bit more um, intense because that there's not as many houses left. I mean, these houses were selling like hotcakes. Come to find out, these promotional deals were not only for our subdivision, but they were offered in, I think they had 12 other communities, or there were 12 communities altogether. And so all these promotional deals were spread out amongst all these houses. And these houses were selling like hotcakes. So you can imagine us being like, wow. And I believe I was like less than 2 weeks out from when we got this house or when we had an appointment. But basically, when we called to get this house or the house down the street, and they said it was sold, I believe I asked around how many deals that they had left. And I think I want to say the week before we had our appointment, a little over a week before, they only had like 12 deals left. And so these houses were selling, and they have multiple communities, and we only know about this one little community. Needless to say, we were, stressing. I mean, we were like, dude, we got to get something. So this house that we have now, it was being built, and it already had. I believe like the brick and everything was already up. But they had to pour some of the concrete, like the driveway, and they were doing a lot of stuff on the inside. And my wife and I were talking about it, and we're like, hey, let's try to, let's just see, and we're thinking the house that we have, I mean, the land that it sits on, I think it's like the biggest piece of land in the subdivision for a lot. If not, there's only one other one that comes close, and I still think that ours is bigger, but I'm not saying that to brag, but that's just talking about, giving the glory to God in this whole situation. And, we're thinking, dude, this is a premium lot because it's so large. It's a corner lot. It's not like at the corner of a main thoroughfare. It's like we're kind of tucked away in like a back or a more rear neighborhood. And God and his timing, when they talk about it, I'm telling you, it's real. Apparently, when builders get into certain phases or getting towards the end of certain phases, they discount things because you have to think about it. If a builder builds a house, every day it sits on the market, they're losing money. They got to pay taxes on it. They got to pay the utilities on it, to keep it running, because you're not going to show a house without power. So basically, they're losing money, the longer it sits there. And so to incentivize some of the buyers, they'll knock off, money off of the lots or, stuff like that to entice the buyer. They may even give other discounts. Well, this discount that we got on this lot, this was a premium lot, and we're both thinking, my wife and I, there's no way we can make this work. I mean, this is like way bigger. I mean, it's probably like 3 times, 4 times the size of like what we were dealing with. Maybe closer to three, but it was like, there's no way. I guess with all the circumstances going on and the builder wanting to get to the next phase or whatever it was, the motivation was, we ended up getting a steal on this lot. There's absolutely no way that we should have gotten this lot for what we got it for. And I, I'm an attorney. I couldn't have negotiated this deal, and I'm telling you that straight up. The God moved in a way that we couldn't, and so he, I don't know, like it was just astounding. But we weren't out of the woods yet. We decided, okay, let's try to get this house. Well, we got the time ticking, and all these deals are, going as quickly as we can. And the builder straight up told me, I was like, well, what happens if you run out of a deal? Because I called her and I said, hey, we want to buy this house. We want to make an appointment basically immediately. But the builder, in good faith, was like, hey, I understand you want to buy the home, but you have to wait for an appointment. She's like, I cannot have you schedule an appointment when people already had pre-existing appointments. It's first come, first serve. So whoever gets to me first and schedules the appointment, that's I'm gonna serve. And I'm like, well, what happens if you guys run out of deals? She's like, then we run out of deals, like promotional deals. That's it. Like, there's nothing else you can do. So, I believe when I had spoken with the builder, yeah, I think it was the week of, like early in the week, or it might have been the end of the week before. And I want to say that they were down to like a handful of deals, maybe like 4, 5, 6 deals left in all 12 communities. So it was dwindling by the day, it seemed like. And if you're familiar with the DFW housing market, really at any of these times, I mean, 2025, it's slowed down quite a bit, but I mean, there are so many people moving here, it's just unreal. And so we, my wife and I are stressing. We're just like, God, please help us. I think I always had a faith, though, that God would provide. But if I'm being honest, I want to say that I didn't expect him to answer the prayer that he answered, like getting this house, like a brand new house. We were kind of saying, well, God will provide us a house, but, we were thinking, oh, maybe it'll be a little older, or maybe just like having an expectation, but not completely just all in, like, oh, it doesn't matter. How Jesus was asleep on the boat and that big storm came and he's just asleep. I mean, we definitely weren't that calm. I mean, we were kind of, I would say, more like the people that were on the boat, like, Lord, Lord, or can you get up, we're perishing, and it was just like, sometimes that's how we felt. We're just like, God, where are you at? Like, this is a Red Sea moment. Like, we need you. Like, that we really want to live here and we feel like we're supposed to live here, but like, what are we supposed to do? Like, and it just felt like we were putting so much time and effort in, and the stress that we felt, it was like, God, we need you to come through. Please come through. And so we ended up having to wait that week out. Um, Saturday comes, and I can't remember if I called the builder or if they called me. My wife was with me in my truck, and I had driven over early to go pick her up from her townhome so we could drive basically like 45 minutes one way to get over here. And I remember speaking with the builder, and you didn't know if you had a deal or not, basically, I guess, until you got there. And I was talking to the builder, and the builder said, hey, our computer's crashed. Um, we don't even know if our system went down. We don't even know if you come over here, if we can sign you up to buy a home or to even purchase a home. They didn't even know about the deals because the system was down. And earlier that week, I'd spoken to my pastor at my old church, and one thing I loved about him was he was very bold. in his faith. This wasn't a prosperity gospel, but he knew the power that Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and the Father operate in. Like he knew, and he would teach his congregation to walk in that bold authority that God gives us to pray, not these weak prayers, but to really attack and to be aggressive in the Spirit. And my realtor goes to the same church. I went to my pastor prayed for me, and I'll never forget that. My realtor, he prayed as well, and I believe he was specifically praying, I come to find out, because he knew about the appointment situation, that people would cancel their appointments or that things would happen where we could get the home. So now here we are, day of. We don't even know if we're getting the house. We don't know what kind of deal is going on. We're just like, and now they don't even know, they can't even tell us if we're going to be able to sign up because the computer system's down. So I look at my wife and I'm like, well, man, this is a lot, and it's a long drive just to get out there and, for nothing. And, my wife straight up was like, I'm not giving up. She's like, we've come this far. We're going to fight. We're going to keep going. And that's all I had to hear. Is that, like, basically, like, we're going to try, because I had said that earlier in the week, when I was telling her about these deals, and she felt the same way I did. I said, look, we're going to try to do it, because the worst thing that we can do is not try and then always live with that regret of the what if we would have gone, what if we would have gotten the house. And I didn't want to live with that. I don't know how long I'm supposed to be here on this planet, but I was not going to live with that regret. So my wife and I drive out there, and the whole time we're just like, man, we just got to see. And my wife's just like, no, we're going in no matter what. We pull up, and there's a family leaving the model home where they conducted the business. We walk in, and they had the computer system back up. And the builder lady told us, our system went down. You guys had an appointment. There were supposed to have been multiple appointments throughout the week. Not just one or two, but multiple. For whatever reason, obviously some people bought homes. But remember, there was only like a handful left. Or maybe a half dozen. And so some people bought homes, obviously, but there was a lot of people, there was other appointments, and there were cancellations. Multiple people had canceled their appointments. I even think that the day that we went, there was supposed to have been an appointment right before ours. They canceled. Whether or not they canceled because of the technical difficulty, I don't know. I'll probably never know. But they canceled. And she said, you guys are the last people to get this deal. It's gone. She said, I called corporate and I advised them what had happened and that you guys had these appointments and stuff. And she said, and I made sure that because you guys were coming and you have everything in line, that you guys would get this last spot. Like, we held it because we knew that you guys were coming in and we didn't cancel. You can't tell me that's not God. When I tell you He exceeds what you expect, He does. Let me tell you, with this interest rate, the housing payment was significantly cheaper than what we had budgeted for. Meaning that all this stuff that we had budgeted for, now we're working with a lot larger budget. The home we got a lot. Like the biggest lot in the subdivision. Beautiful. We can do so many things with this yard. The house we got works virtually perfect for everything we want. And it's the size we want. It checks off virtually all our boxes. It's in a quiet neighborhood. Um, it's a corner lot. I mean, it's just like I could go on. God provided in that time. In that time where we were just like, we're just going to go for it and we're going to trust God. Like, we're going to try. And we prayed. God answered. Even when we had doubts and we were, quote unquote, being unfaithful, He was still faithful. The Bible says He is still faithful even when you are not, because He can't lie. That's not His character. He's not a man that He should lie. So, that being said, God provided a home for us, a home better than we could have ever expected. I mean, this could be a forever home. Um, and it was my first home. And it was my wife. And I mean, my wife also, she had a townhome, but this home was way nicer than anything she had. And there were other things that happened after we bought this house that have come to play that I'm not going to speak on because I don't feel like He told me to speak on it. But like, there's other miracles that have occurred since we've been here. He has provided every step of the way. And let me tell you, whenever you're in a position where you feel like this was our Red Sea moment, God will come through in one way or another. Now, sometimes when He answers, He's not going to answer the way you want, but He always has the best plan. We weren't looking in this area, yet we ended up in the house. It was always ours, we just didn't know it yet. God already had it figured out. He knew all the timing stuff where we could get the best deal possible. Like, He knew all of it. And even though it didn't feel good at times, and it was scary, and it was stressful and frustrating, He was in control the entire time. And ultimately, we ended up where we were supposed to be. And God has provided in this household. And I'm not ashamed to say it. Like, I will tell anybody that asks me, like, yeah, the only reason I live here is because God provided that. In a market that was so tough, yet He helped us get this last promotional deal. Hundreds of homes, we were the last ones to get in before it shut. You talking about the 12th hour? I mean, He answered at the last seconds. So it's just amazing how God works. Um, I do want to say a few words to those of you that are dealing with these kinds of Goliaths in your life, or these big moments that you're waiting on God. It's worth it because God knows best. Don't force it. But if He tells you to do something, make sure you do it. But also know that who the God you serve, He is a God that can do the impossible. This house was an impossible thing. We couldn't have negotiated it. We couldn't have done anything different. We couldn't have done anything by ourselves. Like, the prices were set by the market. I mean, there's nothing we could have done but God. It's almost as if He is drawn to these circumstances where things seem impossible because He just wants to show Himself and His glory to you and prove His existence to you. So, if I had to go back and do it all over again, there's some things I would do differently. I would have prayed more, even though I was praying quite a bit. I would have fasted more, even though I was fasting some. And I would have tried to have a little more faith, not, being a little more calm and reminding myself of the good things He's done in the past. And that is something that we put into practice now. We remind ourselves of what God has done in the past when He's come through. So when we go through our challenges now, we look at this home, the tangible blessings. We look at the other blessings He's given us, and we remind ourselves of the God that we serve, and that His plan is best, and that He knows the timing, and that what is for us, we will have. We don't have to fight and force it. Like, God will provide it. It doesn't mean that we don't have to do anything, but it does mean that we're guaranteed the victory. So I just want to encourage you guys out there. I don't know who this is for. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a preacher. Definitely not a famous guy. I think I have 4 subscribers to this channel. So I'm just a guy talking about Jesus and what he's done. Um, you know, and I'm hoping that if this helps just one person, great. That's all I'm just doing what I feel like God told me to do, and that's to talk about his goodness. I pray that everybody that watches this video will be immensely blessed and that God will prove himself to you in these situations that seem impossible, that he will connect with you in a way that only you know and you cannot deny, and because he created you. And I pray for your families that you guys will be safe and that nothing but prosperity in the future, and that you will accomplish the objectives that God has set for you. Love you guys. You guys have a good one, and God bless.